It's a spiritual. If you turn.
Now, there's a gentleman coming up to speak who I've never had the pleasure of actually talking to before, and he was an elected MEP, and he is somebody that we all have come to know and love through the alternative media. He has appeared occasionally on BBC and such places, but we won't hold him to anything against that. We much prefer the alternative media, and he's going to talk to us about the threat to Western democracy, and I can't think of a better person to ask, Ben Habib.
Well, thank you very much for that very warm welcome, and thank you, all of you, for giving up your Saturday afternoon to listen to us and me. Actually, I was going to talk about Western civilization rather than democracy, but it's interesting to me that Andrew talked about democracy at length, and obviously Alan talked about democracy at length, and democracy is the issue. And you would have heard it said that we practice liberal democracy in this country. Have you heard it said we roll that expression off our tongues as if it's a God-given virtuous form of governance, liberal democracy? We have a liberal democracy in the United Kingdom. Actually, liberalism, which is the promotion of the individual and the giving of rights to the individual, the creation, for example, of human rights, the promotion of equality for women, the emancipation of women, all of that, the two great reform acts of the 19th century, all of that comes from liberalism. But democracy isn't about the individual, actually. Democracy is about the interests of the majority. And liberalism stands, to some extent, in opposition to democracy. Democracy and liberalism work quite well together when there's a healthy tension between the individual and the rights of the individual and the rights of the majority. The majority to be broken down into nation states, communities, tribes, and families. And they stand for the collective good. The collective good isn't always in the interests of the individual. And the interests of the individual are not always in lockstep with the interests of the majority. And it's wonderful when they're working in a healthy tension, because then you get the emergence of a great civilization like the United Kingdom. It's no accident that, contrary to what we're taught, that we were the first to abolish the slave trade, the first to then outlaw slavery, to establish representative democracy in the way that we did, because we had a strong sense of liberalism within our structure. But we also understood for a long, long time the importance of a nation state, of the tribe, of our social construct, of our culture, the ability for the individual to identify with the majority. We understood that very well. And so we had this wonderful form of liberal democracy. But what I think has happened over the last, particularly the last 27 years, is that liberalism has gone mad and democracy has taken a back seat. Democracy is asleep at the wheel and liberals are in control of the agenda. And it's the championing, and it's slightly paradoxical, it's the championing of the individual that has given rise to a lot of the unbridled championing, I should say, of the individual, that's given rise to a lot of the difficulties that we now face as a country. So, for example, if you believe in the individual being the sole pursuit, the promotion of the individual being the sole pursuit of politicians, then it doesn't matter whether your country is governed for the interests of British citizens or immigrants, because immigrants are human beings. They have every right to have all the rights that British citizens do. If you champion and promote the rights of individuals, it's quite easy to make the argument that if the individual wishes to identify as a dog or a man wishes to identify as a woman, they should have the right to do that. It's within their It's within their individual right. But of course, from a majority perspective, it's daft, isn't it? It makes no sense. And as a result of this unbridled liberalism, what we've got is a movement that's taken root that holds democracy in contempt. It holds the majority in contempt because the majority serves to control the individual. And I've really laboured the point, but it's important. And this is why, as Andrew indicated, it's no longer about left and right. It's about whether we're going to have democracy for the people. And in order to have democracy, you have to define that which is your unit of democracy. You have to have nation states. Because if you don't have the nation state of the United Kingdom, you don't have a defined unit through which that democracy works. And if you're a liberal, you hold the nation state in contempt, because the nation state is serving to dumb down the rights of the individual. And that's why the so-called liberals and the so-called self-identifying lefties are often Remainers. They're often Remainers because they don't see the importance of the United Kingdom. They see how betterment can be delivered through global structures, through international treaties, through global cooperation for the global majority. Have you heard that expression? The global majority, not the British majority. So what we've got is liberalism out of control, and they are on the bandwagon of globalism. And the vote for Brexit in 2016 was a vote, it was a cry by the British people to, for goodness sake, reject this liberalism, this unbridled liberalism, reject globalism, bring power back to Westminster, bring power back to the people of this country. And thank you. And they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The organism, the parliamentary representatives we have, were in opposition to the people. And they remain in opposition to the people. And that's why it's so easy for a Conservative Party member, a Conservative Parliamentary Party member, to cross the floor and go and sit with the Labour Party, because they're largely of the same disposition. You know, everyone looked at Natalie Elphink. They described her as, do you remember the Dover MP, Conservative Party? They described her as right-wing, and she seamlessly crossed the floor and sat with Labour, because actually, ideologically, there's not much between them. And, sorry?
A bit of toilet roll.
Yeah, a thin sheet of loo paper, and whether it's soiled or not. And I think it's important we recognise the symptoms, the cause of the symptoms that we're all experiencing, why we're in this room. It's hard to understand that these politicians would want to do us so much damage. And it's taken me a long, long time, not sure I've got all the answers, but it's taken me a long time to get my own head round it. Why it is that they keep doing stuff that's bad for the people of this country. It's because they don't represent you. They're representing their view of the individual, not the majority. They want globalism, they want global governance. And Blair, I mean, Blair was an sadly is, not was, an extraordinary human being, because he could see back in 1997 that if he wished his agenda to be propagated, he would have to undermine the institutions which over centuries had protected us. So what he did was set up, first of all, gave the Bank of England its independence. Then he passed the Human Rights Act, which brought the European Convention of Human Rights and the European Court of Human Rights into the body of our own domestic legislature, making the European Court of Human Rights the supreme arbiter of human rights disputes in the United Kingdom. So effectively, the supreme arbiter of liberalism in this country is a foreign court. You have no control over that court, and it's deliberate. And of course, he went on, he did the same with Ofcom, he did the same with the creation of actually George Osborne created the Office of Budget Responsibility, but all these bodies are designed to strip power away from Parliament, strip scrutiny away from your elected politicians, and invest that power in bodies which can then carry that through parliamentary cycles. Andrew will know this better than me, it's an unsaid constitutional requirement that no parliament in the UK can bind a successive parliament. But Blair, and I'm afraid Andrew's successive Conservative governments, have successfully circumvented that unsaid, critically important rule by vesting power in all these quangos, foreign bodies, international treaties. So when these so-called representatives of the people say, well, we can't do that. That would be in breach of international law. That would make us a pariah nation. What they're saying to you is, we don't care what the majority want. We're going to do what we wish to do. And that's why you can get stakeholder capitalism. Where is Dr. Kong? Yeah, that's why you get stakeholder capitalism. Because bizarrely, when you have unbridled liberalism, you end up in a form of dictatorship because you've stripped power from the people. You've put it in bodies which are unaccountable. You have invested it in large pharma companies. And it's no accident as well that these self-created guardians of humanity all congregate at the World Economic Forum. What you're getting at the World Economic Forum is stakeholder capitalism on steroids, because you've got the most powerful people in the world, are Western leaders, meeting the richest people in the world, behind closed doors, where no minutes are kept, where no agendas are discussed, and the results of which we have no idea of. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't think Klaus Schwab represents the North Korean regime and is pulling strings against the West. But no good ever came of big money meeting big power behind closed doors. And what we've now got, and we've seen it, we saw it on the streets of Amsterdam. Sorry, there's one more thing I want to say before I get to Amsterdam. In the pursuit of liberalism, we have decided that every culture that comes to this country, if they want to practice it, it's their individual right. If you're a Muslim, please do come to this country, practice your religion. We will protect your right to practice that religion. Our culture and our Christian traditions will take a backseat to your culture and your religion. And we have this bizarre situation where the niqab, do you know what I mean by the niqab? The niqab now is an accepted part of British culture. We spent 150 years, possibly 200 years, depending on where you start the battle, of fighting for women's rights to enable women to get the vote and have equal pay, come to the workplace, etc., etc. And that same movement now is repressing women. The niqab is nothing other than the outward expression of the repression of the woman that wears it. And they will tell you, oh no, it's her right to wear it, because that's what she wants to do. Well, there would have been a lot of Victorian women who didn't want the vote. That doesn't mean it's the right thing for the country. And I am offended by the niqab on the streets of London. I'm offended by it. It is a symbol of a regression in the United Kingdom, a regression in our liberal democracy. And don't take that as an anti-Islamic position. I'm not anti-Islamic. The Muslims are absolutely free to do in a Muslim country that which they wish to do. But when they come to this country, which is traditionally a Christian country, where we are genuinely liberal, it is our culture that should reign supreme. But we've put a protected... We've put a protective blanket, not just round Pakistani Muslims who've come here, or Indian Hindus who've come here, or Jews who've come to this country. We've put a protective blanket around them, but we've also put a protective blanket around people with minority sexual preferences, and of course the whole transgender ideology thing, which I touched on earlier. I think I talked about identifying as a dog, but actually it's much more sinister when the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom can't define a woman. If he thinks a woman's got a penis, you know you're being governed by bloody idiots. And I mean, I'm laughing now, I wasn't laughing, because this is actually not that funny, is it? You know, and here's a man, and you know, there are lots of symptoms we see with him, but this is also a man who will take the knee for Black Lives Matter. The progressive discrimination in favour of black people is nothing other than negative discrimination against the white majority in this country. It's another example of where democracy is but being dumbed down in favour of the individual and this so-called liberal agenda. Everything is moving against the majority. And one minor bit of clarification which is interesting. You might ask, why is it that the Jews aren't protected through DEI, through diversity, equity and inclusion, through this protected status that they're given, the progressive discrimination in favour of minorities? Why is it that the Jews are being targeted? Why is it that anti-Semitism is on the rise? Well, I'll tell you why it's on the rise. Because if you put a whole load of people in a protected status, as we have done, ethnic minorities, minority religious beliefs, minority sexual preferences, transgender ideology. If you put them in a protected status, they're protected from us, the majority. But within that protected grouping, the minorities are not protected from the majority in that grouping. And it is the majority in that grouping, which happens to be the 4.9 million Muslims who now live in this country, that will rule the roost over that grouping. Now, it's kind of peculiar. Some of you might scratch your heads. I have done many times, scratch my head, and try to understand why Sadiq Khan, who is a Muslim, would promote transgender ideology and be so pro the LGBTQ plus thing. It's because they are currently fellow travelers. They're traveling together in this protected status together. But how long do you think the gays for Gaza would survive in Gaza? I give them maybe 5 minutes with Hamas. We're creating a dystopia in the United Kingdom. The way we're being governed is dystopic. We saw it with the pandemic, the way in the pursuit of protecting the individual, the majority had to stay at home. In the pursuit of protecting the individual, the majority, everyone had to take the jab. The narrative is all the same. It comes from this broken ideology which is out of control. And liberalism needs a big yank backwards and being put in its box with the promotion simultaneously of the rights of the majority. We need democracy to re-establish itself. And the last point I want to make, we may have 5 minutes of questions if that's all right. I'm quite keen to take questions if that's all right. The last point I want to make is that we are not alone as a country suffering like this. This malaise, this tumor has spread right across Western civilization. The United States has been suffering it. Europe suffers it in spades. Europe is liberal. It's not even democracy anymore. It's liberalism on steroids governed by Brussels. Brussels stands, the European Union stands in opposition to nation states. It stands in opposition. It's not just undemocratic, The EU is anti-democratic. It's positively against nation states. It's taken down borders. One of the reasons we have such a problem with illegal migration is because there ain't no bloody borders in Europe. It's as daft as brushes. If you want to protect your country, you have to have a border around it. So what we're facing is not just the extinguishing of the United Kingdom. Make no mistake, what we're facing is the extinguishing of Western civilization. And we're doing it to ourselves. We're doing it to ourselves. And we need a complete change of direction in the way that we're governed. And I am therefore delighted that the largest, most powerful Western country has elected someone who believes in his nation state, who believes in borders, who believes in wealth creation rather than wealth redistribution, who believes in aspiration over dependency, someone who is going to pose challenges for us. Because we're behind him. We're still practicing this stupid form of Starmageddon. But he is going to give us one hell of a wake-up call. And whatever Lammy says, whatever Lammy says... Okay. Whatever Lammy says, I mean, that may be Trump's position, but essentially he is for the United States of America, and whatever Lammy says, Trump will hold him in contempt, and he will treat this Labour government with contempt, and we should welcome that contempt. Right. Have we got 5 minutes for some really quick questions, or do you want to move on?
I'd like to do some at the end, Ben, if I may, perhaps with you and Andrew and what have you. Is that possible?
Yeah, I've got another... I'm speaking at something at 4 o'clock, but yeah. So can I just... not... If possible, I mean, obviously you can have a preamble before your question, but if the preamble is slightly, shorter than the question, that would be great. Yeah. Gentlemen at the back there, hands up. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah, so, I mean, Amsterdam, I mentioned it and forgot to develop it. Amsterdam, what happened in Amsterdam 2 days ago, is symptomatic of what we're going to see on the streets of the United Kingdom unless we get a grip of this. This is this protected status giving rise to the ability of the pro-Palestinian mob in Amsterdam to actually attack Jews in a way that we would never have expected on the streets of a civilized Western country at the moment. Yeah.
People might be really annoyed about this, but what do you think about Tommy Robinson and what he's doing?
So, it's a good question.
Yeah.
We have a great propensity on our side of the debate to throw our own under the bus. Yeah. And we do it, I'm afraid, because even though we know the BBC is against us, we know Sky is against us, we all naturally, as human beings, want to be accepted. We all naturally want to go with the flow. We don't want to be fired because we hold peculiar views. You know, we want our families to prosper and so on. I don't know Tommy Robinson, but I do know he's done some sterling work on revealing what was happening in Rotherham and so on. And I don't know Tommy Robinson. I'm not going to advocate for Tommy Robinson, but I'm certainly not going to throw Tommy Robinson under a bus. And the surest way of not succeeding as a political party is to attack the electorate. Tommy Robinson's lot, whoever they are British citizens. They're British citizens, and all British citizens have a vote. And any political party which wishes to advance its position should seek those votes. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben. I'm a great admirer of yours, Ben. You're absolutely 100% right. And I can just testify to the fact that we as a family, as a convert Christian family, I was almost bullied to death back in 2015 in Bradford. And we were subsequently vacated by our police from we've suffered umpteen years of Sharia enforcement. And you're quite right. I derive from a Kashmiri Pakistani heritage, born and raised in this country. It is not the country I grew up in. I can tell you hand on heart, and I'd like to tell everybody in this room that they need to understand that Sharia is running rampant. And as I said, at one point I think I was going to Hungary or Poland, we had no protection, and they have made them a protected class. So, as somebody said, I'm the wrong kind of brown.
Yeah, I mean, no one should be protected from the law in the United Kingdom. The law should be blind. It's you know, what is she? She's got a scale in one hand and she's got a sword in the other. It's the sword of justice and the balance of, and she's blindfolded. And the criminal and the Crimes Commission sentencing, I'm slightly digressing, but on your point, the Crime Sentencing Commission, which is the body that advises on how people should be punished once they've been found guilty, was advising that courts should take into account the backgrounds of the individuals they're convicting. I mean, how absurd is that? You should not take anyone's background into account. We are all equal under the eyes of the law. And that's another symptom of this protected status, which is born out of a false liberalism, which we've got to yank back. One more question. Lady in the red jumper. Yeah. Sorry, can I? Okay, I'll come to you afterwards, yeah.
It's not people on our level that are problem, it's people above. Whatever we're looking at, it's the Muslims' fault, it's the Jews' fault. We're not looking at the people that are causing our problems, and they're the people at the top. And all I can see you're doing is trying to agitate.
I'm not agitating at all. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all am I. My father is a Pakistani Muslim. My father is a Pakistani Muslim. My mother is a blonde, blue-eyed Anglo-Saxon Christian, born in Isleworth, not a very prestigious part of the United Kingdom. I have a simple belief, and that is that the Christian tradition of the United Kingdom and the form of democracy that we had, at least when I was a child, was working. And what we've now got is progressive discrimination in favour of minorities, put there by the people on top, these liberals who can't take democracy seriously, and that's what's causing division. People... What we need to say to people is, if you come to this country, you learn our ways. Right, last question, yeah.
Ben, it's a quick one. If the chance of you ever becoming Prime Minister came up, and Andrew was the Environmental Health and Secretary, can I be the Agricultural Secretary?
No political deals. Thank you.
God bless you, Ben. Thank you.